Welcome to Spicy Family Scandals, where real-life drama meets hard-earned wisdom. Today's story is about betrayal, resilience, and the power of standing up for yourself. Let's dive in.
When I walked into the office that morning, the air felt different. Heavy. Too quiet for a place that usually buzzed with energy. I noticed small things right away. The blinds in David's office were drawn, which they never were, and the receptionist, Karen, avoided my gaze like I was carrying a contagious disease. My instincts hummed, a low, uneasy buzz in the back of my mind. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. David wasn't at his desk. That wasn't unusual. He often came in late when he'd been networking. His code for spending half the night out with clients or who knows who. I went to my office, shut the door, and tried to push the bad feeling aside. My hands were shaking as I opened my laptop. I wasn't afraid of him. Not really. But there was a new distance between us lately, one I couldn't explain. I chalked it up to the stress of running a business together. Marriage, kids, work, it was a lot. But deep down I knew better. David had been cold, dismissive. Always on his phone with business calls that ended abruptly whenever I walked into the room. The door to my office slammed open, startling me. I looked up to see David standing there with her. She wasn't just beautiful. She was weaponized, blonde waves, icy blue eyes, a figure designed to turn heads, and an aura of arrogance that practically screamed, I always get what I want. She wasn't from our team. No one on our team could afford the kind of clothes she was wearing. What the hell is this? I asked, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. David stepped forward, his expression infuriatingly calm, as if he were about to present a quarterly report instead of shattering my life. Melissa, this is Cassandra. She's joining the company as, well, let's call it a restructuring. I blinked, feeling the room tilt. Restructuring. My voice sounded foreign to me, hollow and cold. Cassandra stepped in then, her lips curling into a smile so fake it might as well have been plastic. It's a big opportunity for all of us, she said, her voice smooth as honey. David and I have been planning this for months. I'm going to bring fresh energy to the company. For months. Planning this for months. Those words echoed in my skull, each one a hammer blow. David, I said slowly, forcing my voice to stay steady. What the hell is she talking about? He sighed. The way you might sigh at a child throwing a tantrum in the cereal aisle. Melissa, don't make this difficult. You've been distracted lately. Losing your edge. The company needs someone with vision. I slammed my laptop shut, cutting him off. Losing my edge. I snapped, rising to my feet. Are you serious? I built this company, David. Every campaign, every client. Who do you think kept it running while you were out playing golf with partners? And now you're what? Pushing me out for her. Melissa, calm down, he said, his voice icy now. This isn't personal. That was when Cassandra's hand slid onto his arm, her nails like claws resting just lightly enough to seem accidental. It's not personal, she murmured. It's just business. That was when I saw it. The flash of her ring, subtle but unmistakable. My grandmother's diamond. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't think. Couldn't breathe. David saw the shift in my expression, and for the first time he looked nervous. You're a coward, I said, my voice shaking with fury. You're not just taking this company from me. You're trying to erase me. He didn't deny it. Cassandra's smile grew sharper, her eyes glittering with triumph. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but then a strange calm settled over me, cold and clear. I looked at both of them, and forced myself to smile. All right, I said softly. If this is what you want, I won't stand in your way. David's jaw tightened, but Cassandra looked almost disappointed, as if she'd been hoping for a bigger fight. I stepped past them, my heels clicking on the floor as I walked out the door. I didn't slam it. I didn't give them the satisfaction. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that I wasn't walking away. Not really. I had spent years building this company, learning every angle, every secret. And I wasn't going to lose it to a backstabbing husband and his overpriced Barbie doll without a fight. They wanted to play dirty? Fine. I was about to show them what that really looked like. I didn't go home after leaving the office. I couldn't. The thought of sitting in that house, the one David and I had bought together, the one where I raised our 2 kids, made me sick. Instead, I drove to the parking lot of a nearby coffee shop, turned off the engine, and stared blankly out the windshield. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from Karen, our receptionist. Melissa, are you okay? What's going on? I ignored it. I couldn't explain what had just happened. Not yet. My mind was racing, but instead of spiraling into panic, I felt sharp, focused. like the betrayal had flipped a switch inside me, replacing grief with something colder, something dangerous. I took a deep breath and grabbed my bag, pulling out the notebook I always carried for jotting down ideas. My hands were still trembling as I flipped it open and started writing. Timelines, connections, questions. If David thought I was going to roll over and let him and Cassandra steal everything I built, he was delusional. But I wasn't going to act recklessly. Not yet. I needed information. Why was Cassandra here? Who was she really? And why the hell was she wearing my grandmother's ring? The ring was the first clue, the detail that stood out like a flashing red light. I hadn't seen it in years. It had been locked away in the safe at home, part of a small collection of heirlooms I hadn't touched since my mother passed. How did Cassandra get it? Did David give it to her? Or had she taken it herself? I closed the notebook, my jaw tightening. One thing was clear. I wasn't dealing with an ordinary affair. This was calculated, strategic. Cassandra wasn't just some fling. She was a player in a much bigger game. And if she thought she could waltz into my life and take over, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. That night, I waited until I was sure David wouldn't be home. It was his poker night, which I now realized probably had less to do with cards and more to do with Cassandra. I parked a block away and slipped into the house, moving quietly through the familiar halls. I went straight to the office. The safe was hidden behind a panel in the wall, and I hadn't touched it in months. But when I entered the code and pulled the door open, my stomach dropped. It was empty, completely empty. I leaned back, my head spinning. The heirlooms were gone. Documents, too. Our marriage certificate, our kids' birth certificates, even the deed to the house. Everything I'd stored there for safekeeping had vanished. And then I noticed something else. A small envelope sat on the bottom of the safe, the only thing left behind. My name was scrawled on the front in David's handwriting. With shaking hands, I opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper. Melissa, don't do anything stupid. Cassandra and I have everything under control. You'll thank me for this one day. I stared at the note, my heart pounding in my ears. Under control? He wasn't just betraying me, he was erasing me, stealing my life piece by piece. And he thought I'd thank him? I crushed the note in my fist, my mind racing. This wasn't just about the company or the marriage. This was a full-scale takeover. But what David didn't realize, what Cassandra didn't realize, was that I wasn't someone they could just erase. I was going to make them regret ever underestimating me. The next morning, I started making calls. Not to David, and not to anyone on the team. I reached out to an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, but who had always been brilliant at uncovering things people wanted to keep hidden. Her name was Alicia, and she worked as a private investigator now. What do you need, Mel? She asked when I met her later that afternoon. I handed her a photo of Cassandra, one I'd found on David's Facebook page, buried in an album labeled Company Retreat. She was standing next to David laughing, her hand resting on his arm. The photo was from 6 months ago. I need to know everything about her, I said. Who she is, where she came from, what she's hiding. Alicia studied the photo, her expression sharp. You think she's got skeletons in her closet? I think she's the closet. That night, Alicia sent me the first piece of information. Cassandra wasn't who she claimed to be. Her real name wasn't even Cassandra. And as I read through the details of her past, a tangled web of failed businesses, fraudulent ventures, and a string of wealthy men left in her wake, I realized I was dealing with someone dangerous. And I knew exactly how to use that to my advantage. I stared at the report Alicia had sent me, my fingers gripping the edges of the paper, like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. Cassandra's real name was Jessica Langston, a name tied to more lawsuits and scandals than I could count. She wasn't just a grifter. She was a professional, someone who moved from city to city, targeting men like David. And somehow, she'd set her sights on me too. What stood out the most wasn't her string of failed ventures, or the allegations of embezzlement. It was the timeline. Jessica had resurfaced in our city almost a year ago, around the same time David's late nights and networking events became more frequent. Around the same time my grandmother's ring disappeared from the safe. She'd been planning this for far longer than I realized. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. A mention of a sealed court record from 3 years ago. It wasn't much. Just a note that Jessica had been involved in a high-stakes legal battle with her former partner. Partner. Not employer. Not boyfriend. Partner. The implications were clear. She didn't just manipulate men, she dismantled them. And now she was doing the same to me. The next day, I decided it was time to act. I didn't storm into the office or confront David directly. That would have been too easy, too obvious. Instead, I called an emergency meeting with the two people I trusted most in the company. Alex, our lead accountant, and Priya, our head of HR. Melissa, Alex said cautiously as he took a seat across from me. What's going on? Karen said you walked out yesterday. I walked out because David brought her into the office, I said, sliding a photo of Cassandra across the table. He's claiming she's taking over my role. And I think she's here to gut the company. Priya's eyes widened. Wait, what? That woman, she's been hanging around for weeks. I thought she was some kind of consultant. She's not a consultant, I said, my voice firm. She's a con artist. And if we don't stop her, she's going to destroy everything we've built. Alex frowned, leaning forward. Do you have proof? I handed them copies of Alicia's report. Alex scanned it quickly, his brow furrowing deeper with each page. Priya, on the other hand, looked at me, her face full of concern. Melissa, she said softly. If this is true, why hasn't David seen it? Or has he? That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? Was David an oblivious fool who'd fallen for Jessica's lies? Or was he complicit, knowingly helping her rip apart our company? And my life? I don't know, I admitted. But either way, we can't let them win. I need you both to trust me. I'm putting a plan together, but I need time. In the meantime, keep an eye on everything, expenses, accounts, staff communications. Anything unusual, I want to know about it. Alex nodded slowly. All right. But Melissa, if David's involved, he's already made his choice, I said, cutting him off. Now I'm making mine. The first crack in their plan appeared 2 days later. Priya called me late that night, her voice low and urgent. Melissa, I think I found something. Jessica, or Cassandra, or whatever her name is, she's been meeting with some of our clients. Quietly. Off the books. What? I sat up straight, gripping the phone tighter. I didn't think much of it at first, Priya continued. But then I checked the client files. Melissa, she's trying to poach them. And David, he's signing off on it. I felt a wave of anger so fierce it nearly choked me. Who? I demanded. Which clients? Priya hesitated. 2 of our biggest ones. Sterling and Company and Ridgeway Ventures. Those weren't just any clients. They were cornerstone accounts. The kind that kept the lights on and paid everyone's salaries. If Jessica managed to steal them, the company would crumble. And then just like that, the anger faded, replaced by something colder. Something sharper. Because now, I had a way to fight back. The next morning, I made a call to the CEO of Sterling and Company, a man named Gregory Sterling. Gregory and I had worked together for years, and I knew he valued loyalty and transparency. Melissa, he said warmly when he picked up. To what do I owe the pleasure? I'm afraid it's not a social call, I replied. I need to warn you about someone who's been trying to undermine our partnership. I explained everything. Who Jessica was, her history, the documents Priya had found. I didn't embellish or exaggerate. I didn't need to. By the time I was finished, Gregory was silent. Thank you for telling me, he said finally. I'll handle this on my end. And Melissa, I've always respected you. If you ever need support, don't hesitate to call. I hung up, my heart pounding. 1 client secured. Now, I had to make sure Ridgeway Ventures didn't slip through my fingers. That afternoon, I got an email from Alicia. The subject line read, Urgent. You need to see this. Inside was a file. I opened it, and my breath caught as I scanned the contents. Jessica hadn't just conned men. She'd done time for it. 3 years in prison for fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement. The sealed court record? It wasn't just a lawsuit. It was part of a plea deal. And here's the kicker. One of her victims had been her business partner. A man she'd framed, ruined, and left bankrupt. I stared at the screen, realization dawning. David wasn't her accomplice. He was her next target. The pieces clicked together so fast it felt like a slap to the face. David wasn't just being reckless or selfish. He was being set up. Cassandra, or Jessica, or whatever her real name was, didn't just destroy lives. She made her victims believe they were the masterminds of their own downfall. I sat back in my chair, staring at the file Alicia had sent. If I was right, Jessica was following the same playbook she'd used on her previous marks. She was weaving a web of lies around David, making him believe he was in control while she pulled the strings. And once she had what she wanted, our company, our money, our reputation, she'd leave him to take the fall. The question was, how far had she already gotten? The next day, I didn't wait for David to come home. I went to him. He was staying at a boutique hotel downtown. And when I arrived, I found him in the lobby, laughing with Cassandra over martinis like they were celebrating some grand victory. Seeing them together made my stomach churn. but I swallowed the nausea and approached their table. Cassandra spotted me first. Her smile faltered for a split second, then returned, brighter and faker than ever. "Melissa," she said smoothly, as if we were old friends bumping into each other by chance. "What a surprise." "Jessica," I said, my voice steady. Her smile froze, and I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. David glanced between us, his brow furrowing. "What are you talking about?" I ignored him, keeping my gaze locked on Cassandra. "Or should I call you by one of your other aliases? Rebecca? Kate? You've had so many, it's hard to keep track." David shot to his feet. "Melissa, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself." "Am I?" I turned to him, pulling Alicia's file from my bag and slamming it onto the table. "Then maybe you can explain this." Cassandra's face went pale as David snatched the file, flipping through the pages. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to fury. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, shoving the file at Cassandra. Her composure cracked just slightly. "It's lies," she said quickly. "She's trying to discredit me, David. She's jealous, can't you see that?" But David wasn't buying it. "Not anymore. This can't be true," he said, his voice shaking. "You told me you were an investor. You said." "I said what I had to say," Cassandra snapped, her icy veneer finally slipping. She stood grabbing her purse. "You think you can scare me off with some half-baked PI report? You have no proof. No one will believe you." I stepped forward, my voice calm and deliberate. "I don't need anyone to believe me, Jessica. All I have to do is send this file to every client, every partner, every investor we've ever worked with. How long do you think your little game will last when the world knows who you really are?" Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time I saw fear. Real fear. "You wouldn't," she hissed. I smiled. "Try me." Cassandra stormed out, leaving David and me standing in the middle of the lobby. He turned to me, his face a mixture of anger and humiliation. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I laughed, the bitter sound. "Tell you? David, you humiliated me in front of our entire team. You handed her my job, my company, my life, and expected me to just accept it. You trusted her over me. And now you want me to explain myself?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking away. "I didn't know." "No, you didn't." I cut him off. "Because you didn't want to. You were too busy chasing whatever fantasy she sold you to see the truth." He didn't argue. He just stood there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. "I'll fix this," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head. "No, David. I'll fix this. And once I do, you'll be out of my life for good." That night, I went back to the office. It was quiet, the building empty except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. I sat at my desk and started drafting emails. To clients, to investors, to everyone who needed to know the truth about Cassandra. But as I worked, another thought crept into my mind, one that made my heart race. Cassandra was gone for now, but she wouldn't stay gone. She was too good at what she did to give up that easily. If I wanted to end this, really end it, I needed more than just a scandalous report. I needed leverage. Something so damning, so undeniable, that she wouldn't dare show her face again. And I had an idea where to find it. The next morning, I found myself sitting outside Cassandra's condo in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. It wasn't her condo, of course. David had rented it for her under the company's name. Another expense he'd quietly approved while gutting my authority behind the scenes. The audacity of it all fueled me as I waited, watching the building like a hawk. At 10:17 a.m., she emerged, her heels clicking on the pavement as she strutted to her car. Her polished demeanor was back, the icy mask firmly in place. But I wasn't here for her theatrics. I was here for what she'd left behind. As soon as she was out of sight, I stepped out of my car and walked straight into the building. The security guard barely glanced at me. It was easy to bluff, my confident stride, a made-up story about picking something up for David, and the fact that Cassandra had left her spare keycard in the office weeks ago made it all too simple. The elevator ride felt like an eternity. By the time I reached her floor, my heart was pounding, but my resolve was ironclad. Her door clicked open without resistance. The condo was everything I expected, sleek, minimalist, and devoid of any real personality. It was a stage, not a home, designed for appearances and nothing more. But I wasn't here to admire her taste in decor. I went straight for the obvious places, her desk, her bedroom drawers, even the kitchen. She was careful, no doubt about it. There were no incriminating files lying around, no obvious signs of the double life she was leading. But people like Cassandra always had a weak spot, something they overlooked. And when I found it, I almost laughed out loud. A safe. Hidden in the back of her closet, tucked behind a row of designer dresses, was a small wall-mounted safe. It was the same model as the one in our house, an odd detail that made my stomach twist. Had David bought it for her? Or worse, had she chosen it herself, knowing exactly how to dismantle me before she'd even arrived? I didn't have the combination, but I didn't need it. The safe wasn't bolted properly, and with a little effort, I managed to pry it open enough to see inside. My breath caught as I pulled out its contents. A stack of forged contracts with David's signature, bank transfer receipts in the company's name, funneled to offshore accounts. A folder labeled Sterling/Ridgeway notes. The folder was the jackpot. Inside were detailed plans outlining how she'd intended to manipulate our top clients, turn them against us, and redirect their accounts to a new consulting firm she was secretly establishing. But what made my blood run cold was a small envelope tucked at the back of the folder. Inside was a handwritten note. David, once this is done, we'll have everything we need. Stay focused. I'll handle Melissa. Trust me. See ***. Stay focused. Handle me? The words made me feel sick, but they also solidified what I'd suspected all along. David wasn't an innocent victim. He wasn't just a pawn in her game. He'd been complicit from the beginning. As I stood there in Cassandra's condo, holding the evidence of their betrayal in my hands, I realized something important. This wasn't just about protecting the company anymore. This was about protecting myself. For months, I'd been the one blindsided, humiliated, and underestimated. But now, I held all the cards. And if David and Cassandra thought I was going to walk away quietly, they didn't know me at all. I left the condo without a trace, locking the door behind me and slipping the keycard back into my pocket. The drive back to the office was a blur, my mind racing as I pieced together the next steps. First, I scanned the documents and saved digital copies in multiple locations. Then, I made 2 very important calls. The first was to Gregory Sterling. "Melissa," he answered, sounding surprised. "I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon." "Gregory, I found something," I said, my voice steady but urgent. "Something you need to see. It's about Cassandra and David." There was a long pause. "I'm listening." The second call was to Alicia. "I need you to send everything you have on Cassandra to this address," I told her, giving her Gregory's contact information. "And Alicia, I think it's time I made things public." That evening, I scheduled a meeting with the entire team. David, of course, was the last to arrive, his expression sour when he saw me sitting at the head of the table. Cassandra didn't show. She must have sensed the storm brewing. "What's this about?" David asked, dropping into his chair and crossing his arms. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I turned on the projector and brought up the scanned documents from Cassandra's safe. The contracts, the bank transfers, the notes, everything. "This," I said, my voice calm but sharp, "is what your new partner has been up to." David's face turned ghostly pale as the room fell into stunned silence. "And in case you were wondering," I continued, clicking to the next slide, "I've already sent copies to our top clients, our legal team, and just to be safe, the authorities." "You can't do this," David stammered, his voice rising. "Melissa, this will ruin everything." "No, David," I snapped, cutting him off. "You ruined everything, and now you're going to face the consequences." For the first time, he looked truly afraid. But I wasn't finished yet. Because this wasn't just about exposing Cassandra. It was about exposing both of them. The room was so silent you could hear the faint hum of the overhead lights. David sat frozen in his chair, his eyes darting from the screen to the stunned faces of our employees. His carefully constructed facade, the confident businessman, the loving husband, was crumbling before my eyes. But I wasn't here to savor his downfall. I was here to finish what he and Cassandra had started. "You think this is all a misunderstanding?" I asked, my voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "You think Cassandra acted alone?" I clicked to the next slide. On the screen appeared the note I'd found in Cassandra's safe. The one she'd written to David, with his name scrawled in her neat handwriting. Gasps rippled through the room. "This," I said, pointing to the damning letter, "proves David wasn't just a victim of Cassandra's manipulation. He was her partner. While the rest of us were working to keep this company afloat, he was busy plotting with her to steal everything we'd built." "That's not true." David's voice cracked as he shot to his feet. "You don't know what you're talking about, Melissa. Cassandra, she's lying. She set me up." I folded my arms and looked him dead in the eye. "Set you up? So, you didn't sign off on those fake contracts? You didn't authorize the offshore accounts? You didn't put her in my office and humiliate me in front of our team?" David opened his mouth, then closed it again. For a moment, he looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, teetering, desperate for something, anything, to save him. She said it was temporary, he mumbled finally, his voice barely audible. She said it was a strategy to expand the business. I didn't know she'd. Stop lying. I snapped, my tone sharp enough to make him flinch. You knew exactly what you were doing. You wanted me out. You wanted her in. And now you've got exactly what you deserve. I turned back to the team, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me. For those of you who trusted me, who stayed loyal through this mess, I want you to know I'm not going anywhere. This company is my legacy, and I'm going to protect it with everything I have. If anyone feels differently, there's the door. No one moved. Not Alex, not Priya, not Karen. They all sat rooted in their chairs, their expressions a mix of shock and relief. And as for you, David, I said, turning back to him, you're done. Effective immediately, you're removed from your position. I've already filed the paperwork to freeze your access to company accounts and systems. You'll hear from my lawyer about the next steps. David's face turned crimson, his anger finally bubbling to the surface. You can't do this, he shouted. You don't have the authority. Oh, but I do. I interrupted, my voice icy. You see, while you were busy conspiring with Cassandra, I was making my own moves. I called an emergency board meeting last night. They've seen the evidence, and they voted unanimously to back me. You've got no leverage, no allies, and no way out. His mouth opened, then closed again. He looked around the room, desperate for someone to defend him, but all he found were stony glares. Melissa, he said finally, his voice trembling now. We can work this out. I'll leave Cassandra. I'll fix this. Just don't do this to me. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper only he could hear. You did this to yourself, David. And you don't get to crawl back to me after everything you've done. You made your choice. Now live with it. David stormed out, slamming the door behind him, and I let out a shaky breath. The confrontation was over, but the real work had just begun. Later that evening, I sat in my office, staring at the skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was Alicia. Melissa, she said, her tone urgent. There's something you need to know. Cassandra's disappeared. What? I straightened in my chair. She cleaned out her accounts and vanished. No sign of her anywhere. It's like she knew the walls were closing in and bolted. I closed my eyes, exhaustion washing over me. Of course she'd run. It was her MO. Destroy everything, then disappear before anyone could hold her accountable. But this time, she'd left empty-handed. I had the evidence, the clients, and the company. And David, he was left with nothing but the wreckage of his own arrogance. As I sat there, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. Not happiness, this wasn't a happy ending, but closure. For the first time in months, I felt like I was back in control of my life. Cassandra was gone, David was out of my way, and I had everything I needed to rebuild. And rebuild I would. Stronger, smarter, and on my own terms. They thought they'd taken everything from me, but in the end, they only made me stronger. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of cleanup, confrontation, and rebuilding. The fallout from David and Cassandra's betrayal rippled through the company, but instead of crumbling under the weight of their actions, I focused on restoring what mattered most, trust. Our clients rallied around me, not because I begged for their support, but because I laid everything out, honest, raw, and transparent. I shared what Cassandra had tried to do, backed by the evidence Alicia and I had uncovered. I didn't sugarcoat anything, even when it meant exposing how deeply David had betrayed not just me, but the people who had invested their time and faith in our company. Gregory Sterling, ever the gentleman, sent me a handwritten note. Melissa, I've seen many storms in my years of business, but none navigated as gracefully as this one. Consider Sterling and Company loyal for the long haul. Best Gregory. It wasn't just business. It was validation. I wasn't the woman David and Cassandra had tried to paint me as, a weak, distracted relic holding the company back. I was a leader, a fighter, and for the first time in years, I felt unstoppable. David's departure was swift and final. He tried to fight the board's decision, but his involvement with Cassandra had poisoned his credibility beyond repair. I didn't bother dragging him through the courts for more than was necessary. I wanted him out of my life, and I wasn't going to waste another minute chasing vengeance. The last time I saw him was in the conference room, emptying his desk into a cardboard box. He looked up as I entered, his face etched with exhaustion and defeat. I was wrong, he said quietly, not meeting my eyes. You were, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted. Fix me? I almost laughed at the irony. For years, I had been the one patching him up, smoothing over his mistakes, forgiving his flaws. But not anymore. That's not my job anymore, David, I said, my tone soft but resolute. Good luck. And with that, I walked away, leaving him to face the consequences of his choices alone. But Cassandra, or Jessica, wasn't quite done with me. A week after she disappeared, I received an email from an anonymous address. Attached was a single photo. Cassandra standing at a marina, boarding a sleek yacht. Subject line, "See you soon." It was a warning, a final jab meant to unsettle me. But instead of fear, I felt a strange sense of triumph. She might have escaped for now, but her days of running were numbered. I had passed everything Alicia uncovered to law enforcement, and with her fraudulent accounts frozen, and her reputation in tatters, it was only a matter of time before someone caught up to her. She could threaten me all she wanted, but I wasn't that woman anymore, the one blindsided and humiliated in her own office. I was ready for her, should she ever return. The company stabilized faster than I'd expected. My team, galvanized by everything we'd endured, rallied around me with a fierce loyalty I'd never seen before. Priya became my right hand. Alex spearheaded our financial recovery, and Karen, who had kept the office running during the chaos, earned herself a well-deserved promotion. With Cassandra gone, I was free to rebuild in my image. I rebranded the company, shifting its focus to emphasize integrity, transparency, and empowerment. Values David and Cassandra had forgotten, but ones I had always held close. The response was overwhelming. New clients poured in, referrals doubled, and for the first time in years, I felt proud of what I'd created. One evening, months later, I found myself sitting on my back porch with a glass of wine, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The house was quiet. My kids were at their dad's, and for once, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt peaceful. My phone buzzed with a text from Alicia. "You did it, Mel. She's on the run, David's out of your way, and the company is thriving. What's next?" I thought about it for a moment before replying. Whatever I want. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't living for someone else's expectations. I wasn't cleaning up someone else's mess. I was free. And that was the sweetest victory of all.